Hi, welcome to another edition of Astronomy for Everyone. My name is Dr. Timothy Day, and I get to play the host again tonight because we're doing an episode of Summer Sky Lore and Mythology. This is a follow-up to our spring, and then we'll get to go fall and winter as our year moves along. My guest and expert is the person who usually gets to sit in this chair. Welcome, Don Glaser.
Thank you, Tim. Glad to be here to bring this program to our viewers.
And it's fun for me to get to sit over here for a change and try to meet up with your skills. I hope I maintain the standards.
You're doing great. Doing great.
So tell us a little bit about what it is we're going to explore tonight.
Well, we're going to look at the mythology of the constellations of the summer sky in the first segment. And then in the second segment, we're going to look at mythology of the moon.
Okay, so there'll be constellations in our first part, sun and moon for the second.
Exactly. Okay.
Very good. Okay, so people tend to look at randomness and nature and superimpose patterns on that because that's a useful survival skill. And what's really cool is that different cultures will take the things they know from their world and their lives and look up to the sun or the sky and try to tell those stories up there as well.
Exactly. And that leads us to our first constellation, Scorpius.
Okay.
Prime constellation of summer. Now, we're going to start with the Greco-Roman story. That's what most of us are familiar with.
That's the traditional one.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly what we know in Western culture.
All right.
And we're going to start with the story of Orion and the Scorpion.
Tell us.
Well, Orion was a very famous hunter, and he would boast that he could kill all of the animals on the earth. Well, this boast upset Gaia, who was the earth goddess, and she was in charge of taking care of all these animals, and she didn't want this to happen.
I could see her point of view.
So to keep him from doing that, she placed along the path that he took to go hunting a scorpion. And as Orion walks by, the scorpion stings him on the heel and kills him. Well, Diana, the goddess of the moon, who is in love with Orion, is distraught. So she goes to Jupiter and asks that could he please place Orion up in the sky so that she can see him as she drives the chariot of the moon across the sky every night. Jupiter agrees and places him up in the sky. But he also places the scorpion to act as a warning, if you will, to others who might want to be as boastful as Orion. But to make sure there's no further trouble between the two, he placed one in the summer, the scorpion, and the other in the winter, Orion.
So they're separated by the 6 months of time.
Exactly, exactly. Now, while a lot of cultures see a scorpion, there is one culture that does see something a little bit different, and it's the folks of the South Pacific, the Polynesians. They see a fishhook.
Now, do they even have scorpions in the Polynesians?
You know, I don't honestly know. It wouldn't surprise me if they didn't. But as we can see in the image, this does look like a fishhook. And the part where we see the head of the scorpion, it kind of ends at the bright star Antares. Now, it's a fascinating story, one that I'm sure a lot of parents would know if they took their children to see the movie Moana. But in this story, Maui steals a fishhook from his brother to go fishing. Well, he tosses it into the ocean, and he snags it on the bottom. So he starts pulling and can't get it loose. So he dives down into the ocean, gets the hook, starts to pull from down there, and starts to break it loose. Okay, but the hook is still attached, but he's breaking loose whatever it's attached to. So he comes back to the surface, pulls and pulls and pulls, and lo and behold, he brings up an island. Now, this island is populated with people. It has birds and trees. And, well, he's just so darn proud of himself that he unhooks the hook, tosses it into the sky so that he could look at it all the time and remember his great feat. And the island that he brought up was the one we know as New Zealand.
So this is another extraordinary feat, and it sort of takes a mixture of the earth and even indeed below the oceans, and it casts it up into the sky where everybody can see it and be reminded of the theme.
Exactly. Now, getting back to some of the other cultures, the Akkadians, Sumerians, Babylonians, even the Aboriginal Australians, Aztecs, and Mayans all saw a scorpion. And we have a photo of a scorpion. There it is, or a painting, actually, I should say.
So these are cultures that might actually have this creature and be familiar with
I
it.
would have to think so, to be so specific. Of course, it does have that great shape, and if you have scorpions in your environment, how can you not
How
see
could
a
you
scorpion?
miss that?
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, well, thank you. Take us on to our next one.
Well, actually, it's Libra or Libra. It's off to the right. And originally, this constellation was part of the Scorpion, specifically the two brightest stars, the ones you see connected by a straight line. They represented the claws of the Scorpion.
Oh, I
okay,
can see
as we
how
can
that
see
would
there,
work,
yep,
yeah.
in the picture.
All right.
Now, eventually, Libra was made its own constellation known as the Scales.
That's the balancing.
Balancing, exactly.
Okay.
And we can see in this image here just exactly
It does
how
look like
that,
a scale.
that
Yep,
worked
and
out.
It's tilted one way.
Exactly. Now, this theme of the scale and balancing things was used by the Egyptians. And we can see in this painting from an Egyptian tomb how they used the scale or the balance. You can see it there. And what they did is they used that to weigh a person's soul, which they identified with the heart. Now, putting on the scale, if the feather was heavier, that meant the person was pure, without guilt or sin or whatever you want to call it. And so they would go to the afterlife up in the heavens. But if it wasn't, yep,
Down.
And
Bad news for the soul.
you went down to the darkness of the underworld.
You sink in the metaphor, and you sink in the story of where you're going to go next.
Exactly. And the Greeks also had that same feeling of the scales with the goddess Themis, the goddess of justice.
Were these now the same time contemporaneously, the Greco-Romans and the Egyptians? Both
Egyptians
seeing a
were
scale?
earlier.
The Egyptians came first.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of this would even move farther east to the land between the rivers, Mesopotamia, where a lot of this seemed to originate.
Which is where we're going to kind of travel shortly.
Well, yeah, well, we're going to look at our next constellation, Sagittarius the Archer. Okay.
Okay.
Now, here's the constellation, and this is supposed to be a centaur, half man, half horse in the Greek story. And here you can see the
And that's
picture. of
this fellow here in black on the screen.
right in the center, and even has his name above the little shaft that he's holding.
To the right there, yeah.
Yeah, written in Greek.
And he's got a bunch of critters on a pole and smiling and looking back over himself.
Well, this
other
one
characters.
particular centaur was quite a person. Now, centaurs usually were very cruel and debased creatures.
Oh, they were
Drinking,
mean.
licentious behavior.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, not very
Terrible
good at all.
characters.
Exactly. But Chiron was different. He was very kind and knowledgeable. He taught the sons of kings, even taught Hercules and Achilles and Jason.
So he was wise himself.
He was. He
And
was
an
even
instructor.
He was even the teacher of Asclepius.
The doctor.
Exactly, the first physician. Exactly. Now, he was immortal, and he brought kindness to the earth in his teachings. But because he was immortal, that caused him a problem. Because one day, while Hercules was in one of his 12 labors,
Great labors that he did.
yes,
Right,
we'll get to in just a little bit, Hercules, fired an arrow that had been dipped in the blood of the snake Hydra, okay, another constellation that we won't cover, but the blood was poisonous. The arrow missed its mark, hit Chiron. Now, because he's immortal, he'll never die, but he suffered in great pain and agony. So eventually, he goes to Jupiter and asks to die, to relieve him of this pain. Jupiter agrees and places him in the sky to honor him for his kindness. Now, we also see today in the constellation a certain shape that most of us can see, and it's this one right here, the teapot asterism.
And that's actually really easy for me to see, at least. That's something I'm comfortable going, oh yeah, there's a teapot.
Yeah, it stands right out, and you've got the spout, the lid, and the handle. Looks just like Grandma's teapot. So versus looking at that and trying to see a half man, half horse.
That one's a bit more of a stretch. The Greeks had imagination.
The teapot, yeah, I think we're good with the teapot. Exactly, exactly. Well, so we've covered a number of these summer constellations, and we'll have the moon to talk about in the second part. And it's surprising that how much mythology there is about the moon. I was surprised in looking into it back with ancient cultures, and I think our viewers are going to be very well entertained by.
I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We'll come back with the second part shortly.
All right.
And now for Steve Whitty.
And term of the month.
And term of the month.
Thanks, Tim. The term of the month is Vulcan. Vulcan is a planet that was proposed that orbited between Mercury and the Sun. Urban Le Verrier attempted to explain the peculiarities of Mercury's orbit with this proposed planet. Despite Le Verrier's successful prediction of Neptune, Vulcan was never found. There are some Mercury-crossing asteroids. All of these have orbits which are bigger on average than Mercury's orbit. Mercury's odd orbit was then later explained by Einstein's general relativity. In a twist of fate, we had a show where we interviewed EMU, their observatory, and with a refractor that was in fact used to search for Vulcan. Of course, they didn't find it. Now, Vulcan is also the fictional name of Star Trek's humanoid species home. I'm talking, of course, of the Vulcans. It was supposed to orbit 40 Eridani, which is about 16 light years from Earth. Now, that's according to James Bliss, who wrote one of the novels. Now, we don't know of any planets orbiting that star, but there is an unconfirmed planet orbiting Epsilon Eridani, which is in the same constellation. It's about 10 light years away. If it exists, it should be about just a little bit bigger than Jupiter. That's not the planet you're looking for. And that is the term of the month. Back to you, Tim.
All right.
Hi, and welcome to the second half of Astronomy for Everyone. I remain Dr. Timothy Day, and I get to keep playing in the host chair tonight. And this is Don Clazier. Don, we're going to talk in the second half about the moon and what the cultures we've been kind of reviewing thought about that.
Exactly, Tim, exactly. Now, the moon is our solitary natural satellite, and it's been a fascination for both astronomers and astrologers as well. Now, a lot of early cultures looked upon the moon in really both ways, both male and female. It's kind of funny how that varied back and forth. But they always saw the moon as the shy one that would only come out after the light of day was gone.
Only come out at night.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's been a plethora of cults and that wrapped around the moon as a deity. Our first one is the moon cult of Mesopotamia.
So this is way back.
Yeah, about 5,000 years ago in the city of Ur was the moon god. And you can see him right here in this tablet called a stela from the city of Ur, which is in present-day Iraq. And this represents the moon god Nana, who was the father of the sun. And there's his statue right there. Now, there was a giant priesthood that was built around the worship of the sun god.
Okay.
And to honor him, they built huge structures. And we've got an image of one of these right here.
Oh, yeah. Steps, bricks. desert, blue sky.
Exactly. This is the ziggurat of Ur. Now, this has been reconstructed during the reign of Saddam Hussein, who was trying to glorify the ancient, area which his country was a part of. All right. So they rebuilt it. So that's great. But this is the type of thing that they would build to honor the moon god Nana. Now, the Native Americans had a little bit different look, whole take on this thing. We hear the stories about in the beginning, there was no light, there was no form. Well, the Native American story starts out without light. The moon, along with his wife, the sun, again looking at the moon as male again.
So the moon is male twice now.
Yeah. They both lived in a windowless house, so their light would never get out. Well, eventually a little angleworm starts drilling holes through the walls of the house. And into these holes, a gopher inserts fleas. Well, they put in so many of these fleas that they start tormenting the sun and the moon.
I can only imagine.
And to get away from this torment, they burst out of the house, bringing light to the earth, the brighter light by day and the softer light by night.
Gophers forced fleas into hookworm holes, and the sun and the moon fled.
Exactly.
And now we got the light.
Exactly. Now, in India, the moon was seen as one of the 4 children of the earth. And central to this whole idea was the Great World Tree. Now, this idea, here we can see the Hindu Great World Tree. This idea, surprisingly, carries across to a number of different cultures. For example, the Mayan Indians of Mexico and Central America, this is their Great World Tree.
Yeah.
And as well, the Norths of Scandinavia had their own idea of a world tree, which also encompassed their idea of the 9 worlds.
All 3 of those cultures managed to find that common theme, that complex tapestry, the tree that took people from the earth to the heavens.
The tree connected earth with heaven, and people were supposed to nurture the earth and nurture this connection. The problem was, at least in the Indian story, the tree grew so tall, it blocked out the light. So in order to get the light back, they had to cut down the tree. But at that point, we lost the connection to heaven, according to the story.
And that's a common theme throughout cultures as well,
right.
isn't it?
The idea of the Great World
Well,
Tree.
those were wonderful figures. It's amazing to see those connections.
Now, for the Polynesians, the people of the South Pacific, they saw the moon as female. And here we see the picture of the moon goddess Haina. That was worshipped throughout the South Pacific.
Flow of energy off of her.
Exactly. She was known as the first woman. Now, for other cultures, such as the Inuit, the people who live in the Arctic area, Persians, Greeks, and even other cultures, they considered the moon to be a way station. So as the moon started to grow bigger, moving from new, especially illustrated by this photo of the gibbous moon.
Beautiful image with the craters highlighted on the right side.
Oh, it's a great image.
Yeah.
So for these people, as they saw the moon getting larger, that indicated to them that more and more souls were arriving at this way station on their way to the afterlife in heaven.
They were filling it up.
Right. And so then once it got to full moon and started to shrink back down, okay, there we see the full moon, shrinking back down again, that meant those souls were departing the way station, the moon, and heading up to heaven.
It was a halfway point. They're transmigrating, filling it up.
Exactly.
And then it emptying out and the cycle repeats.
Exactly.
I'm struck between the tree of life and the moon, both sort of being intermediaries for people or souls or ideas from earth to heaven.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this seems to carry across in a number of different cultures. What surprises me is that some of these cultures, like when we were talking about the Great World Tree, these cultures are separated by time and distance, from Scandinavia to Central America and even to India. I mean,
So you're going from the poles to the equators and over thousands or even tens of thousands of years of culture.
and these are the days before the internet, fax machines, newspapers. It makes you
Common
wonder,
languages. How did they do it? How did the ideas make
or
it?
did these ideas start from our central beginning, and then they were carried out as we?
It's almost
populated
as if
the
there's an internal template and it just keeps getting stamped out in some variation over culture and time.
Earth. Exactly.
That's a
exactly.
fascinating
It's
exploration.
to
That's great.
to ponder on that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Now, our last look at the moon is going to be with Egypt. There's a lot of rich mythology there with them. And here we can see an image of the goddess Isis.
With her wings spread and
Yes.
such grace and form and
Right. Well, she
Color.
was the wife of Osiris, the creator god in the Egyptian mythology.
married to power.
Exactly. And she contained the mysteries of motherhood. So here again, we're looking at the feminine side.
The renewer, the soft, the
As
Right.
with the Polynesians, again, that fertility cults and the carrying on of the generations. So when she's pictured in human form, a lot of times you'll see her from front on. Now this particular picture shows her from a side view. But when we see her face on, she generally has a set of cow horns on her head, which are really
we can
kind of
see
difficult.
something up there at
Well,
the top.
she has
Yeah,
something
just
on her head.
A hint, right?
I was hoping to be able to find one of those images, but I couldn't.
We need to turn her head on.
Yeah.
And we could see the horns.
But between the horns was the disk of the moon. Okay, again, the moon, the feminine, the fertility cult.
Refreshing, renewing, recreating, the Nile flooding and enriching the banks, and you can plant once
Exactly,
again.
exactly. And of course, looking at the male, which was Ra, the sun god. Okay, so you've got the daylight and the nightlight in that regard. So normally that's how she's pictured, seeing her front on, but in this case we were able to get her from a side view, holding her arms out wide to humanity. And I found it interesting. There was a story that I read where it talks about on one of the statues they discovered, there was an inscription. And of course, we're able to read the hieroglyphs of the Egyptians. That was done
Thanks
about
to the
200 years ago.
Rosetta Stone, right?
Exactly. And that was deciphered. And so the inscription on it I thought was quite profound, actually. And so I wanted to read it to our viewers.
Oh, please do.
verbatim,
Yeah.
just to make sure I got it right.
Let it
The
fly.
inscription reads, I am that which is, has been, and shall be. My veil no one has lifted. The fruit I bore is the sun.
And the poetry reaches out across the millennia and the
Yeah.
cultures and sounds as sweet today as it must have been.
I think so. And
Thank you
that's
for
why,
taking us on that tour. That was
yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
This has been another edition of Astronomy for Everyone. I remain Dr. Timothy Day and Don Clazier as always. At the bottom of your screen, sorry, Don, didn't mean to-
No.
At the
You're the
bottom of the
host.
screen,
This month anyway.
see the email address and feel free to reach out to us, to write to us. We love to get your mail and we love to respond to your questions. Also, following it, you'll see our website. And if you want to visit there, you'll see a list of all the Astronomy for Everyone shows listed in chronological order. There's a lot there to explore, over 100 of them now, and we visited an awful lot of fun subjects. Thank you for joining us. And now we're going to go to What's Up with Stephen.
What's up in the night sky for June 2018? Because we have the summer solstice on the 21st, sunrise and sunset don't change much. So over the course of the month, the sun rises at 6 a.m. and it sets around 9 p.m. The moon starts with the third quarter on the 6th. There's a new moon on the 13th, the first quarter on the 20th, and the full moon on the 28th. Now, on the 30th of June, at 9:13 p.m., a time that is chosen for Mercury because of when it sets. So Mercury is in Taurus to Cancer over the month. It rises at 5:43 a.m. and then, by the end of the month it sets at 9:38. So what happened is we have superior conjunction on the 5th of June, and that's when Mercury is in fact on the other side of the sun, but Mercury comes around so fast that we then have it set at the end of the month. Perihelion is on the 6th of June, so it's a very quick trip around the moon, around the sun, because Mercury is as close to the sun as it can get. Venus goes from Gemini to Leo, so same slide, and so it sets 11:38 to 11:30 over the month. It's kind of it's the weird Venus orbit. And then Jupiter is in Libra, and it sets 4:49 a.m. to 2:49 a.m., so 2 hours. That's typical for a month. Then we move to still the 30th of June, but at 4 a.m. We have Uranus, which is in Aries, and it rises between 4 a.m. and 2 a.m. over the month. Neptune is in Aquarius, which rises between 2:30 and just 30 minutes after midnight over the month. Mars, which is in Capricorn, rises about 1 a.m. to about 11 p.m. over the month. Pluto in Sagittarius rises 11:44 p.m. to 8:54 p.m., so it's like midnight to 9 o'clock. Pluto is still, I think, best in July and August. It's magnitude 14.2, so you really need a 10-inch telescope. That's a quarter of a meter in order to be able to have any chance of seeing it. Saturn is also in Sagittarius. It rises just before 11 p.m. to just before 9 p.m. Over the course of the month. Saturn is up most of the night this month. Opposition is the 27th of June, so it's as close to the sun as it gets. It's just totally glorious if you get a chance to see Saturn. And that is what's up in the night sky for June 2018. Now remember, in Astronomy for Everyone, the show is free, but we may tax your brain.